Hello everyone, welcome to FS Changemakers. Today we have Dr. Shalini Lal joining us. Shalini is the co-founder and CEO of Unqbe, which is a think tank and consulting company that offers workshops and seminars around future of work. She is also the founder of InfinityOD, through which she helps leadership teams across organizations be more future ready and help them on innovation and agility. She also hosts the Future of Work show on LinkedIn, which is quite a popular show. In her career spanning 28 years in human resources, she was the head of HR for Deutsche Bank. She was the head of HR for Escorts Limited. But prior to that, she did her MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. She is a PhD from UCLA. She studied economics at St. Stephen's College, and she's also a Wharton Fellow. Uh, that was quite an exhaustive list of so many different achievements that you have, Shalini. I hope I've not missed out on anything.
No, I do have a correction though. So I wasn't head of HR at Deutsche Bank. I was heading talent and development for globally for one of Deutsche Bank's verticals, just to set the record straight there.
Got it. Got it. Cool. So Shalini, obviously you've had an illustrious career. Let's start right at the beginning. After studying economics and then your MBA at IIM Ahmedabad, how did you got interested in human resources to start with?
Oh, when I went to IIM, I knew nothing about anything, frankly. It was a month after I turned 20. And now that I have kids so older than that, I'm not as surprised as I was at the time that I was absolutely clueless. The only reason I went there was because I got through. And I was good at MCQs. That's what it was. So when I went to IIM, I actually didn't enjoy the experience at all. One, I had really no reason to be there other than the fact that they had accepted me. Second, I didn't quite like the it's a very high pressure setting, but more than that, there's no time to sort of sit and reflect. And I'm the kind of person who loves to think of an idea, think about it for a few days, let it work its way through me. Whereas the actual IIM experience was absolutely different. 3 classes a day, you barely had time to sort of absorb what was happening in one, and you jumped into the next. So it really wasn't an experience that I was enjoying much. In fact, my summers were absolutely traditional. At that time, the thing was to go to the big banks, which is what I did. I went to Bank Orleans and Crindley's. I was so bored that I thought I'm going to kill myself if this is what my career is going to be about. And then sometime in the second year, I did a program called Explorations in Roles and Identity, which was with a professor who many of you might know, Professor Indira Parekh. She's really, really well known in the field. And that completely blew my mind. It was an offsite, so I think we were about 35 of us. We sat in small groups talking about our life experiences and interpreting each other's life experiences to make sense of where we are, where we want to go. And for me, frankly, that was the very, very first time in my life that I had given careful thought to any of this. And while I didn't speak in the program, when I came back, it was like, okay, that's it. This is what I want to do. Nothing else I've done in the entire program has come anywhere close to this in terms of how much it excited me. So I didn't take placement actually my year. We had this possibility, at least at that time, that you could defer placement by a year and you could spend a year, something like a gap year, except the gap year hadn't as yet become a thing to do. So I did that, and I worked with one of Professor Indira Parekh's colleagues in Delhi to get a sense of, okay, what's it like to do labs? How do I understand people, their life experiences? And all the while, of course, when you're doing this, it's partly professional. It's also very personal because you're trying to make sense of your own life and, how is it that you want to lead it, which may or may not be the same way that many others are, choosing to make their choices. So that's really how I got started. It was it was really like the penny dropping, an epiphany for me when I said, okay, this is it. That was one decision which I must say that I really got right. I chose my field correctly because now, as you said, 28 years, right? and it's still as exciting. I think something connected, and I think that's something which, if it happens with you, you're really fortunate. If something just tugs at you and you say, okay, this is your thing. So that's really what happened with me.
So, Shalini, after choosing that this is what you want to do, and then doing it for maybe 25 years of your career, what made you decide to focus on future of work, which is something that you've been working on for the past few years now?
Yeah. It's a really great question. What happened was that when I was at Deutsche Bank was going through this huge restructuring, and we knew that our own vertical was there were major changes coming up, and there were going to be huge changes for a lot of the senior leadership. So it sort of, we knew that there was a big shift coming up. And while that was on, I was trying to figure out, okay, so what is it that I want to do next? One of the things that you mentioned, that I did a PhD in between, and that meant that I had some experience with research, writing, asking good questions, etc. And to use my time well, actually, I thought, why don't I write a paper on entrepreneurs? Because through my career, I really hadn't had much interaction with entrepreneurs till then. It was academics or large established organizations. So let me meet them, speak to them, interview them, understand their stories, and then try and see if this is something that might be of interest to me. So when I was doing that, two things happened. One, entrepreneurship opened up as a possibility that maybe I don't have to look for a job in another sort of established company. Maybe there is something else I can do, and that sort of opened up as, okay, these are people like me. Then okay, they're very smart, but not that different from me. So I thought this is something maybe I
You're
could
smart
do.
as well.
True. I mean, many of them are really smart as well. So when I met them, I felt, okay, ye to mere jaise hai, like, I mean, they've done this. Maybe I can do it. So that sort of opened up as a possibility. The second thing, which I realized for the first time, is how much the world of startups was different from the world of established organizations. And my career till then had been really with the big, companies, and the startups were doing so much work that was interesting. And obviously, a lot of it is to do with where technology is opening up possibilities. So that's where my interest in technology began, and I read up a lot around what's happening in the larger world, what is these days called the fourth industrial revolution, etc., etc. And as I started understanding that, I realized, okay, the world is changing in ways that we haven't quite planned for. So that's really where my interest sort of started in the area of the future of work. I realized that our organizations, particularly large and established organizations, really were not designed for the kind of transformation that they would need in this new world, this post or during fourth industrial revolution world, or exponential world of change. My doctoral research was actually on what does it take for organizations to be adaptive. So, it was like many things coming together. I felt that what I had to offer so closely matched what was going to be the need of the hour, that how are organizations now going to transform themselves into organizations that have the capacity for innovation and agility. And there was an opportunity, and of course then I sort of opened my mind to the possibility of entrepreneurship. So it was all these things coming together that made me finally say, okay, maybe this is something I want to do with the rest of my life. So here we
So,
are.
Shalini, what would you say are three or four, key characteristics which define the future of work versus what the organizations typically do today, and changes that they need to make?
Yeah, it's a big question actually, and I'll tell you, future of work itself is a term that's used quite differently. So there's one which is these days a very, very popular format. When you say future of work, very often you're speaking about, okay, are people going to work remotely? Are they going to come to work? Is it going to be a hybrid kind of environment? And very often when people use the term future of work, that is the small, I would say, subset that they are referring to. And in that context, obviously, the pandemic has, sort of, it's broken psychological barriers that existed for frankly, 100 years. And for me personally, what I find extremely exciting about the world we're entering is that, many of our ideas about how work should happen actually date back to the second industrial revolution, when mass manufacturing became possible. The assembly line got invented, division of labor got invented as a concept, supervision, managers, a bureaucracy, hierarchy. So all of this that, the world we sort of take for granted actually had a very, very specific context within which it arose. And that was when, we discovered that there's a science to work. You can study work, divide it into activities, assign people job roles, specifications. So, there it belongs to that universe, the whole 9 to 5 working, the going to office. Its origins were in a world where, manufacturing really was was at the heart of organizations. Of course, the world we live in today looks very different. And as we move ahead, it's going to look increasingly different as work itself gets digitized. And so what's exciting for me is that it opens up many, many possibilities. At the very, very simplest level, there is the idea of hybrid working, which I think a very large number of organizations are speaking about today. At Unqbe, we had done some research on this in January and found that about 35% of all organizations have pretty definite plans of going hybrid. Uh, but then it also means many other things. It means technology and humans working together as, almost peers and colleagues, because technologies as they're emerging today and as they will as will increasingly be true, will have capacities that, human beings don't quite have. And evolution is much too slow a process. So technology is going to be far ahead of, where humans can be on their own. So we're looking at a period of much stronger integration of people and technologies in work teams. And some might even say that technology is going to be the supervisor to many. Like, for instance, your Uber drivers, actually, their real supervisor is technology. So we're going to see much more of that, where it's technology who's the boss.
So, Shalini, you've seen organizations across the world and Indian organizations. How would you say the Indian organizations are placed versus their global peers in terms of their readiness for this transition?
See, there's some things Indian organizations do really, really well. And I think one of the things Indian organizations do really, really well is speed. We're very, very fast. When we see something needs to be done, I think our capacity to make it happen overnight is quite tremendous. So I think Indian organizations are really good at speed. We're also very good at sort of seizing the moment, where we see something has to happen, just put together the resources, everybody work overtime or till do whatever it takes to get the job done. So we're really, really good at that part. And Indian businessmen and women, businesswomen, have been really, really good at both of these, seeing an opportunity, seeing a possibility of, okay, there's a commercial possibility here. Let me organize everything that needs to be organized to make the best use of that. So that's something that Indian organizations do really well. But then there's something which and again, this is a super generalization because there are organizations and organizations and organizations. But since you ask, as a national characteristic, one thing we're not that good at is we don't put much emphasis on building the right organization. So, it's one thing to grab a business opportunity that requires commercial acumen, which absolutely, absolutely is at the heart of any business. But the other part of it is building the organization, which has the capacity not just to respond to that particular business opportunity, but to be able to either respond to or better still create more and more business opportunities as you go along. Indian organizations traditionally have not been very good at that. Part of it is that, as a national characteristic, India is very high on power distance. Hierarchies matter in a certain way. And therefore, a lot of ideas generally come from, the top, and then they're executed, across the organization. But tomorrow's organization is going to need capacities which are far beyond what one or two people at the top, are humanly capable of, even no matter how smart they might be. So you're going to need a far more decentralization, far more autonomy, empowerment, and horizontal structures which allow different parts of organizations to talk to each other and come up with, what's the best solution here, without the top person or the top team necessarily being part of every single conversation. So I think that's something Indian organizations so far haven't done so well. Of course, things I'm hoping will change, but that's not a strength that we have as a country. We don't build great organizations. We have good commercial acumen.
So now that we've spoken about the organizational part, talking about the other end of the spectrum, which is employees, what do you think they need to do? What are some skills that they need to pick up to be ready as the world changes?
I think see, the first skill, and it's not even a skill, it's a combination of a mindset and many, many skills underneath that, is knowing that from here on, you are on your own, essentially. And what I mean when I'm saying you're on your own is that you'll have to take, you'll have to really take the ownership of how your life and career pan out, because organizations are not going to be able to do that, even if they wish to. And fewer wish to. But even if they did, they're not going to be able to do that, because organizations themselves will be faced with so much external change that for their very survival, what's going to come first is survival. And, taking care of employees' careers, is not something which is going to find space when there's a lot of external change, simply because you can't plan ahead. You don't know 5 years later what jobs you're going to have. So, a lot of the career planning, job, development, leadership development, etc., rested on some fundamental assumptions that, okay, you have some way of saying what your organization will look like 5 or 10 years from now, and you have sort of some fundamental building blocks that you can predict. But as external change becomes that much faster, organizations internally won't have as many steady building blocks, because those jobs may not exist or may exist in a very, very different form. So because of all of this, the first thing is, to be truly Atmanirbhar, you have to take ownership of your life and career in a way that no other generation in our living memory has had to. And that means, frankly, starting to think for yourself. And that's something, if I might be a little critical, I don't know if we do that well, particularly in India. I think we're so much better at following instructions, or sort of coloring between the lines when we're told that this is what you have to do. But really critically examining, thinking for yourself, is not a skill that is very widely developed. It isn't developed in the family system, for instance, where the best children sort of play within whatever the family's ideas of what are acceptable are. It doesn't play well in, the organizational system, where the best employees do pretty much the same. So this is something which you pretty much have to do on your own. Organizations will not be able to help you. So that's the first part. And it's a huge part, because within that are nested many, many skills. The other is, you have to have a much stronger, paradoxically, both external focus and internal focus. So the external focus is on understanding where the world is moving, and therefore what opportunities are opening out for you. Because if you wait for it to become common knowledge, then you're entering that field much too late. By that time, there are millions and millions of people who've already sort of gone a few steps ahead. So you need a much stronger external focus in understanding, okay, let me for myself try and see where, whatever, 5, 10 fields, whatever are within your area of interest, where are they headed? And there are actually systematic tools to do that. You can track signals in their early stages to see what possibilities are emerging from those signals across people, culture, technology, and the geopolitical spectrum. So you can do that, but that's something you will have to do by yourself, for yourself, and seeing, okay, this is where I want my career to play. So while you're doing the external mapping, there's also much deeper internal anchoring that you will need, because when everything outside is changing so fast, you need some inner compass that will tell you, okay, these are the new 10 opportunities which might emerge. Now, which of these makes sense for me? And for that, you need something that's your own internal compass that's pretty specific to you, and who you are, what you want in life, how do you respond to different environments, how do you respond to different work settings. So you paradoxically need a very strong set of external antenna and a very strong internal compass to map. Imagine if you have a map and that map changes every time you look at it. That's really what we're talking about.
So this also brings an interesting problem, right? So if you are thinking about the future and what makes you future ready, how do you maintain the balance to also make sure that you're performing at your level best in the present as well? Because you can get too swayed by what the future may bring and actually not do a good enough job in the present.
Actually, where you are today and the skills you're developing today are like, it's like going into your wall of your career wall. That's a steady place. That's where you are at this moment, and from there, that's your vantage point of saying, okay, so now that I'm here and this is something that I'm doing quite well, or at least I feel I have enough skills in, what lies ahead. Just as an example, if I may, uh, like when I was thinking about my entrepreneurial career or whatever, there was something that I had that was solid of my own, that I had worked on for, at that time, 25 years. And I felt, okay, this is something that are my skills. These are things that I can do really well. Now what is emerging, and therefore which direction can I, sort of head in from here on? So you do need both. You need your own set of, and which can't happen. You can't have your, to be strong in where you are today does require attention to where you are today. Actually, the future has so many paradoxes. You need focus on outside, on inside, on present and future.
So talking about the present again, so we are obviously going through this entire pandemic. What are some of the things that you've noticed on how organizations have dealt with the pandemic when it comes to people in the organizations, and some would have done a better job than the others? And what are some things you believe companies which have done well have done versus the others?
Actually, organizations have done quite a good job on the whole. So let me just share that as Unqbe, we did a small dipstick study on this a couple of weeks back, particularly when the second wave was really at its peak in Delhi. And I wrote a blog post on Forbes on this. And what I had discovered in that dipstick survey was that organizations had very quickly filled in the role which sort of the state machinery had left vacant, which was to provide employees with someone to go to when they are faced with a difficult circumstance. And here it is, either COVID for themselves or very often COVID as a caregiver. So, some weeks back, when there was tremendous scarcity, particularly an NCR for, everything, right from any kind of medical attention to beds, to oxygen, to medicines, etc., etc. And this was also the time when there were endless lists of, there are 2 beds available in this hospital. This is the doctor, this is the medicine. And nobody quite knew whether any of this information was true. In fact, most people who tried those numbers, came back with the answer that a lot of them were duds. So, that was really a starting point. And for many organizations, that's what they did. They just started off by vetting the numbers so that in case somebody needs help, they have a few trusted resources that they can go to. Like, this is where you go to, these are the hospitals, this is where you get medicines, etc. And by the way, it seems like a small thing, but it's a huge, huge support for people who, when they're faced with a challenge like this, frankly, have felt completely alone. And, and it all depended on, the extent of your friend network and, the extent to which they could support you or help you. So I think that's one place where I think almost all organizations have helped in some way or the other. But then there are others, like the larger organizations, like the Infosys type of organizations, which have stepped in and provided facilities of their own, like oxygen beds, um, doctors. There was one medium-sized company in actually Faridabad who spoke about how they were trying to at least have a ready source of oxygen cylinders at hand in case someone in their organization needed it. So I think organizations were pretty quick, I would say, to respond when the second wave was at its peak. And in Delhi, it was like a wall, right? So every day the numbers were climbing. Within 48 or 72 hours, organizations started stepping in to see, how is it that we can help people. So that's something I say organizations did really, really well. Of course, many organizations have now introduced new HR policies like COVID leave. If you fall sick, or if you have to look after somebody in your home who falls sick, or vaccination camps, for their employees and friends and family as well. So I think organizations have actually played a very, very important role uh, when I think for the most part employees had nobody to turn to except family, friends. So I think they've done really well, to be honest.
Shalini, it's been 28 years that you've been now working. What keeps you still going?
I love my work. I think, you know, see, careers are built over decades. And I think when we're 20, we don't quite realize that it isn't a question of, do XYZ job and, uh, you know, whatever attendant stuff frills go with that job, certain salary or title. And of course, that's exciting. But unless you really care about the work that you do, that soon gets pretty tiring. And I mean, I'm sure you have seen, I know I have seen organizations are filled with people who don't necessarily really enjoy what they're doing. And they're there because it pays the bills. And by the way, I completely understand that. I completely understand that. But it doesn't feed the soul, even if it pays the bills. And sometimes you can do that by having something else in your life that's, there to feed your soul, and that's also fine. But I think it is also possible, and much more possible today than it ever was before, to build your entire life around knowing something that, something that matters to you. Uh, and I think that if that happens in your life, it's a wonderful thing.
Thanks for sharing that. It was really great to hear. I genuinely am a huge believer in myself doing what makes you happy and doing something that you love. Obviously, sometimes there is not a choice, and that has to be understood. But yes, if you have a choice, do something that you really want to do. Shalini, you're also the host of a very popular LinkedIn show. What do you think makes you click as a talk show host? And if there are any tips that I can use to get better?
uh, Actually, I should ask you to tell me what makes it click or not. But I think so. I invite people whom I want to talk to, and that's a bit of a advantage of having your own show, and it's by my own company, right? So I'm a curious person, and I'm very interested in finding out more about a lot of things. Uh, I love the fact that we live in a world today where if you're curious and want to know more, uh, digitally you can reach out to people. So a lot of people come back to me and say, "Oh, wow, you have a brilliant network," because we've had amazing and a lot of big names also on the show. But between you and me, a lot of them are people I had never met before. It's just that I reached out to them saying, "I'm doing this. I want to know the answers to this." So we could either have a one-on-one chat over Zoom, and that would be fine too. Or if you're comfortable, let's do it as a live, so that each of our shows is watched by several thousand people. So uh, that way many others can benefit. So it's driven by a very genuine, it's curiosity. I want to know the answers. I want to know what they're thinking, because that's also the other way for me to understand what's happening in the world around me. Because those are the forms, right? You can read a lot, which I do read a lot. I do formal research, which is also another way. But then this is another format for doing that. Just talk to people.
So you're an HR professional. You are running two different organizations at the same time. You're running a talk show at the same time. How do you maintain, balance in your life and make sure that the personal front as well as the work front kind of there is some amount of balance between the two?
I'm one of the lucky ones in the sense that the way I've built my life at this point in time, uh, I have a lot of say in how I spend my day. So, I can choose to move something from Monday to Wednesday if it fits in better there. I have a good sense by now of what kind of jobs do I want to do absolutely uninterrupted. And, I don't want any distraction. So, I can set aside very large chunks. I'm also a writer. So, I used to write for Mint. These days I write for Forbes. So, writing in particular requires large chunks of time which are uninterrupted to get into the flow, for instance, as do many other, such sort of the deep thinking, kind of activities. So I have that, I'm in a place in my life where I can do that. I can shift things around so that, I do my work planning by a week and not every day. And then, things sort of fit in where they need to fit in. So I think that's really, really helpful. Knowing what brings out the best in you as a person. Like I have my own little ritual, which puts me in the right frame of mind, and that, for different kinds of activities. So I think a lot of it is discovering, having an intention of, okay, I really want to do a lot of these things because I care about them, and I want to use my energy and focus as best as I can so that I'm able to, whatever it is that I'm doing, I'm able to give it my best. um, it isn't at all like it used to be when I was working in, more sort of familiar corporate jobs where I had far less, control over the way my day would go. So I think that's what allows me to do multiple things and bring them together.
So we're now at the last leg of our chat. So there are a series of questions which we ask, all our guests. So the first in that is that we would love to know a story from your life, any particular instance, which defines you and makes you the kind of person that you are.
Okay, so I mean, one of the biggest dilemmas I had was to do a PhD or not, to be honest. I I'd been working for 11 years, to be honest, when I went and, started off my doctoral studies. I went to UCLA. Um, but it was a very hard choice because I was at that time head of organizational development and learning and development and change for the Bharti group, Airtel and all its sister organizations. So it was also something that I really loved, and I just loved what I was doing. Uh, but then there was this crossroad. I had gotten accepted at UCLA, and in fact, there's a really famous professor, Bilochi, who wrote this book, Theory Z. He said he would like to work with me. And I was torn because, on the one hand, if I left, it meant uh, from what was a pretty decent, sort of salary to uh, being on a student stipend, it meant moving with the whole family. My kids were, they were going to Sanskriti in Delhi. As you know, how difficult it is to get admissions. They were all well set. My husband was at the time working for, ITC Will's Lifestyle. So it was just, everything was set. And I'm a very strong family person. So even the thought of just going by myself didn't fit well at all. So that was a big crossroad. It was a very, very, very difficult choice. And to be honest, when I chose to go, even my parents couldn't understand my decision. They were like, what sense is this? You have everything here, anything you could hope for. You work in an area you like, etc., etc., etc. It was a very hard choice. I went because I had this vision that at some point I wanted to be, you know, whatever expert means, some kind of an expert in my field. And I thought I didn't have enough of an education, like an MBA is pretty superficial. I didn't have enough of an education to be an expert in my field. So I would say that was a hard one. And it impacted not just me, but the entire family because we all moved.
So let's before we wrap it up, let's do a quick rapid fire round. So we'll ask you 3 questions, and don't want you to think a lot before answering them. And the first thing that comes to your mind should ideally be the answer here. So let's get started. So the first one is, who are the 3 Indian women that you look up to?
Oh. Faye D'Souza, Barkha Dutt, many of the younger women entrepreneurs, by the way, Shreyasi Singh, Esther Martinez, Sairi Chahal, even Ayushi. So many women whom I look up to.
Awesome. Which are the 5 wardrobe staples that you need to have at all times?
T-shirt and jeans is like absolute must. But then a few work blouses, because that's what I do. I usually like relaxed wear, so like a relaxed wear bottom, which, by the way, I often buy from Fable Street, because you have these wonderful relaxed culottes, which I think are really lovely to work in, and a nice pair of shoes that are comfortable.
Thank you for sharing that. So, and the last one is, any message that you would like to share with the audience who are watching us today?
Okay, see, this is where I'm at today. I think if you can find a way for your heart, mind, actions to be in the same general direction, I think that's the best place to be. All the other stuff, everything else that sort of seems important at different parts of your life, finally, I would say, is much, much less important than you think. Because unless you have all of this sort of integrated well, and you're living a life of integrity in that sense, where all of you is all of you together, life is very dissatisfying in some very fundamental ways. So if there were a message, I would say, find a way to bring all of these together in the way you live your life, and that opens up an energy within that is not accessible any other way.
Thank you, Shalini. That is a great note to end this discussion on. It was a pleasure having you here. Thanks for taking out the time.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. All the best.